Okay, guys, welcome to the August 2023 FM BetterForms Friday Live Community Meetup. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. I'm Charles Dolphs, founder of FM BetterForms, and we got a bunch of people from the team today. They're going to be doing some presentations, and I'm really excited to have one of the oldest, longest running users of BetterForms. They're not sort of ground zero in terms of clients, but they've been building and they built some of the most complex apps in our community. And that's some guests from Paul Costanzo and Vanessa Costanzo from NaviCu. So that's going to be our community spotlight. Community spotlight is going to be a new feature that we're going to have every Friday live or two, and we try to feature some different dev houses and see how they're the types of things that they're building and how they're using BetterForms as well. We're going to jump right into things. I don't have too many initial announcements today. But today we're going to go through our regular segments. We have Pearson with UX Corner. We're going to go popular series is our back to basics, HTML, JavaScript, Vue basics, and part 5 on that. And that's going to be led by Andrew and Christina, I believe, today. Hassan is not with us today. And then we have our main feature, which is our community spotlight, and then some questions and answers. We're going to have a draw afterwards. And as usual, we're always hang out going onward. All right, so we'll jump right into things. Just a couple quick notes that we are recording this, and we usually make the recording available next week or a week after. Most of the time, it's posted up in our Slack, and then we also post it on all our socials as well. We do try to encourage everybody to be interactive and ask questions, as everybody knows, because we're pretty casual, and we want to kind of keep it that way and not too sterile. All right, so we're going to jump over to things. Pearson, if you're good to go. I know we're jumping in a little quick right away, but
Yeah, I think I'm good to go. Let me just get this all set up. Uh, if you want to stall for just one more minute, I think I'm good to go.
actually, I'll mention a couple quick things that are kind of coming up, and I haven't even looked at these myself. But let me check this out because one of the team just told me about this morning. So I haven't even checked this out, but this is a new thing that they're working on. I'll just show you quick. It's like a new feature. We're trying to make the different things easier to use, more intuitive, and so on. And this is one of the ones that they put into the app. And I haven't even seen this. Michael just said it's coming along. So currently we have this notion of slots. Slots are like spaces within the application where you can add or inject consistent pieces of code, and they'll show up kind of like in a global type manner. And they're scoped differently. Some of them are scoped to the site, to the header, the footer. Some of them are scoped just to that page, and so on. So one of the things that Michael is doing is, let's see here. It looks like it's taken apart right now, but maybe not. Maybe this is it here. So these are basically all of different positions of slots in here. And I don't know how this works. I haven't even tried this yet, but we're trying to make it more in a visual idea, so you have a better idea of where this piece of code will sit. And I think there is some descriptions in here: form header, form footer, and so on. A navigation sidebar, middle and bottom, and so on. So I think that's going to give you a little bit more understanding of how these slots will eventually work. This is a very, very early beta, or not even a beta. It's just in development right now. But we welcome your feedback on these kinds of things if you have any. Yeah. So that's something that's going to be kind of coming up and new.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm ready to take over now. If we're all ready to move on to learning a little bit about some usability heuristics. Today we'll be focusing on error prevention. So to start off, I guess I'm sure I think I might have mentioned these heuristics in the past, maybe in passing. But this is a set of guidelines created by the Nielsen and Norman Group, who are essentially the founders or the innovators of modern UX design in digital space. So they have these 10 kind of rules of thumbs where these are the foundations of what makes a good user experience. So we have the all 10 of these visibility of system statuses matching between real world and digital. Um, all these are equally as valid, but today, just because I think I've touched on a couple of these in previous presentations, I wanted to talk about error prevention. And so, what is error prevention? Well, the definition of error prevention is that it focuses on designing systems that prevent users from making mistakes and helping them easily recover when they do. So what you're trying to do is or the value is that when you minimize these errors, it reduces the frustration from the user and their inability to complete tasks, and it enhances their user satisfaction. There's a couple different types of errors that we might encounter in even in the real world, in any kind of environment. We call them or we differentiate them between slips and mistakes. So a slip, that's an unconscious error caused by inattention. Maybe you're just focused on something else. You kind of just made a quick mistake. For example, typing in the wrong letters, just making a typo. Um, these guys, they used an example of, putting liquid hand soap on your toothbrush and then toothpaste in your hands when you're, just waking up in the morning. That's what you'd call a slip. Whereas a mistake is more of a conscious error based on a mismatch between the user's mental model and the actual design. So, for example, if you're in your car and you see a warning light on your dashboard and you think it's the tire pressure, but it's actually the oil, maybe an oil pressure error in your vehicle, but you are under the assumption that it's your tire pressure. So, despite how perfectly you might be filling up your tires with air afterwards, it's not going to result in the error being fixed because you just misunderstood what the error was even trying to tell you, or there was a mismatch between the model that you had in your head and the method of execution to actually solve that error. So that's what we would call a mistake. And so, yeah, just essentially conscious versus unconscious errors is how we like to differentiate them. But the key principles to prevent these errors is recognizing and preventing them by identifying the potential user errors before they occur and designing ways to prevent them in the first place. Providing clear feedback when they do make a mistake, giving them immediate and clear feedback when they make the error, and offering easy error recovery so that they can easily fix their error without any significant consequences. So, for example, here this is a very common one. Just in any kind of form field, you have here we have the email was entered incorrectly. So before they even enter their phone number, before they reach the bottom of that form, because sometimes these things can get pretty long and extensive, it's just giving you a warning immediately because it recognizes the mistake. Inherently because there's a missing at symbol in the email. So here we realize this can't be a real email. This is going to result in an error when you try to make it to the next step. So we're just going to tell you right now before you get too far and you forget where you were. And even if you do get past this area, uh, you have the warning at the top to let you know there is something wrong in the information you've entered, and it highlights in red to make sure that when you scroll back up, or if you've lost track of where you are, you know exactly where that error is, and it gives you a little warning to say, here is the mistake that we've noticed, and so here's how you can fix it without forcing you to have to uh, figure it out on your own. We just want to let them know right off the bat. So some other really common examples here with the password, creating a password. If we have these requirements, then might as well might as well show the user up front instead of having them try to guess what makes a good password, or even if maybe it's just a genuine question from them, what makes a good password. We give them a little some guidelines to say, hey, it should be this many characters long, it should have these specific requirements, and that's going to prevent them from entering in their favorite 1 2 3 4 5 6 password, and then being confused when it's not working. We're just letting them know this is what we require, and makes it easier for them. Another one might be, if you're working in software, I think uh, any kind of software that I've used for my creative work, they auto save in the background, but in case of a crash or something, so I guess I read the message wrong. This is in the case of, deleting something very important, making sure that they're not creating or they're not committing to any uh, destructive actions that could impact them in the future. So just giving them a warning is a method of preventing an error later when they realize I just deleted the wrong thing and I didn't realize how important it was. Um, to the point I was just describing earlier, if you're working in software that autosaves and it crashes, sometimes when you reopen up that software, it gives you the opportunity right off the bat to say, hey, do you want to recover the last file that you were working on? Like the software crashed unexpectedly. Would you like to recover what you were working on? Same thing with some web browsers. I know Chrome does this. If your Chrome browser shuts off or crashes, or if you turn off your computer without closing everything properly, next time you open up that application, it'll give you the opportunity to restore what you just were working on. And these are kind of I guess the this one is less of a preventative measure, but it is still applying the principle of uh, giving the user an easy method of fixing a problem that they might have encountered. So in this case, the problem was that they closed all the 100 tabs that we were just talking about before this meeting. When you have all those tabs open and you know there was a couple important ones in there and it shuts down, here's a way to recover those pages without you having to search through all your history. An example that I've encountered, and this was kind of a funny realization um, when I when I noticed this when I was talking to one of my co-designers. In this case, we were trying to figure out a way to reorder these images, and there were two different types of images. You have your special photos and you have your regular photos. And so we were just trying to figure out how to rearrange these in any order for the user to customize. And so when I was designing it in the first place, I knew there are special photos and there's other photos. We don't want to mix those up because that would be confusing. So if a user tried to drag one of these regular photos into the special photos section, I thought, oh, we'll put an error there to explain why you can't do that. And so there was a red error that would appear just to say only special photos can be in the special photos section. And when I showed the other designer, the first thing she said was, why not just let them do it? Why are we creating the error when sure they can move their photo up into the special photo section and it just turns into a special photo? So I was creating an error where really there was no reason to create that error in the first place. Um, so that was just kind of a funny situation where I realized that I was actually creating more of a boundary than I was preventing anything because I was inhibiting their ability to perform an action that really wouldn't have been a big deal. And if anything, allowing them to rearrange these photos in order here and also rearranging them into which sections they should be a part of instead of having to click this special little favorite icon. Why not just let them drag in and out of these sections on their own? So that's kind of an example of error prevention where to prevent this error from occurring, don't make it an error in the first place. So that's a special kind of circumstance. It's not going to apply to everything, but I just thought that was a really funny real world example that I just encountered this month. So actually, there was one more example that I didn't get a photo of, but it was an example that the Nielsen and Norman Group put out there as kind of a physical example is the guardrails on a curvy road. You're not putting styrofoam and bubble wrap at the bottom of the cliff to prevent or to help the person who drives off the edge. You're putting the guardrails up in the first place to prevent them from falling off at all. So that's kind of an extreme example in the real world, but it's the same kind of principles of uh, making sure that any errors that do occur are minimized and preventing anything from hopefully occurring in the first place. And so some general tips just to get started with this error prevention is to prioritize your efforts in obviously the high cost errors should be the highest priority of what to avoid. So that would be something like preventing users from deleting really important files or deleting or creating destructive action or performing destructive actions that could impact them in the future. And then some smaller ones to prioritize once you get those big ones out. Small frustrations that might just improve the quality of life of the user when they're interacting with your space. Maybe that's you know, giving them the error when they enter their email incorrectly, and you just let them know, hey, I think there was a typo here. Just those small things that aren't gonna absolutely destroy the the work that they're doing, but it does create a more positive experience. It makes them feel a little more comfortable using your software, and it builds, a level of trust because the user will understand that okay, they're looking out for me. If I'll know if I'm doing anything wrong because they'll let me know. Second is to avoid those slips that we talked about. Those are the unconscious efforts that maybe is just from, like I said, a typo. Just creating these guidelines to create helpful restraints and um, provide good defaults. And I didn't get into this specifically, but what I mean by a good default is, let's say you're working on something and you have let's say you have a sheet or a list of items that are organized by date. I know that's a kind of a common use case that we have in our software where you're selecting dates. A good default might be, hey, I know that the users are going to always choose find the records from the last month. Make that the default. Because if you know what the users are likely going to do, you can provide this default to, for one, make their experience a little faster, kind of expedite that action, doing it for them in the first place. And it also gives context to the user as to what they're interacting with. So if you see the list and it's already set to uh, showing the previous month's records, um, it gives them just context to know, okay, so I can choose these quick time frames, or this I know this is where I'm choosing my date range. So that's what I refer to when I call it a good default. And the last one is just preventing those mistakes, removing memory burdens, supporting undue actions, and warning your users to prevent those mistakes from happening in the first place. So that's what I have to say about error prevention. You know, like I said, there are 10 of these heuristics, and if you're ever interested in learning more about them, the Nielsen and Norman Group, they have a really helpful website that they provide tons of articles. They go a lot more in depth in these heuristics. If you guys are interested in hearing more about them, I can consider doing more in-depth explanations of these in future presentations like this. But I just think error prevention is a really simple and easy to understand heuristic to get us started. Anybody have questions about error prevention or any of these other heuristics that you'd like to hear about?
I know one of the things I've seen quite a bit, like almost like I see this in a lot of FileMaker apps, is you go to a layout and then they just dump all the data there, and then you're filtering it down. But I notice the trend on most web apps is you go to the layout of a list, some kind of a list view, and there's nothing there, like not even recents, until you start to search. So I guess that sort of falls, was that sort of fall into the same logic? Like,
Yeah, I would call that, like, that would be a good default, is to give some, or at least to have some of that data appear by default instead of having them to uh, just be presented with an empty state right off the bat. Sometimes it can be useful to show an empty state off the bat, but in other cases, if it is software that the users will be looking for data, there's no reason to keep it empty off the bat because especially if you know that they're always going to be looking, or they're likely going to be looking for a data set from this specific time period, you can set that as the default because it saves them some time and it gives them context as to, uh, you know, switching the dates or picking date ranges like that.
so would you use like say most recent most recent things that I've had is showing those. Like almost everybody here has some type of a database that has some list view in it,
Mhm.
and you go to that list view, and so now I guess I'm trying to understand what would be some good defaults most recently used,
Yeah, most
or
recently used. I know we use that in BetterForms for if you have a bunch of apps that you're working on, we have that quick view or that quick selection view where it shows you the most recent apps that you were working on, and that's giving the opportunity for the user to go back to something that they were recently working on. But if it's something like a database of receipts or like maybe a list of orders uh, that have been ordered, and you want to and users whoever's using the software are always going to be looking for monthly summaries, for example, you might just set the first screen or the first page to open the previous month's summary of data just by default because you know that's likely what they're going to be doing. If it's kind of like 80% of the time, they're going to be looking for that data set. 20% of the time, they might be looking for a more specific set. You might as well give them that data set that 80% of the time they're going to be looking for. And that 20% of the time, they can edit the date range on their own instead of just keeping it blank off the bat and then forcing everybody to select a date range.
does anybody do that currently in their apps? Have like default non-empty states of certain found things. Neil, do you do that in any of your apps at all? Like you go in and see recent clients or clinics or
Yeah, I tend to load the most recent 50 that have been modified. So if it's like a treatment or a client record, then it'll load the most recent 50 for them. And then obviously have the data table. The data table search on server. Then if they start typing and actually look for a person's name, it then just obviously then loads the matching records.
what about when you go back to that layout? Do you still have that data there or like the
Yeah,
recent?
so that I've got that set up with the app model sync, so that'll keep the filter in place. So if someone goes back, it'll still have the three records showing that match that filter. And then when you click into the filter field, it selects the whole text, so they can just type again without having to then manually select and delete.
Yeah, I think that works perfectly. And here I can read a quick blurb about what the Nielsen and Norman Group have to say about defaults. But they say that especially when users have to perform repetitive actions, offering reasonable defaults that are likely to fit their real world goals and allow them to refine their choices is the best way to implement these defaults. So, for example, they say in a reminder app, maybe or like an app that is set to remind you of things, a typical preset might be such as remind me tomorrow or remind me next week, remind me in 1 hour,
Mhm.
and so on. So they can prevent typos and dates or times. And it's also a reminder to um, oh, they were just using this example, as a reminder to take out dinner from the oven, uh, in an hour instead of the next day. So good defaults just help reduce mistakes because they teach users about reasonable values for the question at hand. They also help users understand the question and sometimes make them realize they're on the wrong track. So that's just another method of uh, preventing errors because you're giving them context, you're giving them an example of a default, um, and maybe it'll teach them that they're maybe thinking of the action at hand in the wrong way. But yeah, thank you for listening.
And Pearson, just one quick thing, that website, would you mind posting that link in the chat, and then we can
Sure.
add it to the meetup page.
Yeah, I'll give a link to their list of their 10 heuristics. So this page is kind of just a blog article summarizing their 10 heuristics pretty quickly, but um, they can go much more in depth. There's a lot more resources on this website than just those 10 heuristics. So I sent the link in the chat, and feel free to take a look at that.
All right, next we're going to continue with some of our team, Christina and Andrew, I believe it is today, and they're going to be presenting. I guess I'm not even sure, to be honest with you, so we'll pass it over to you guys.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. We started off talking about monitors because we're going to be doing media breakpoints today. So welcome to today's Dev Corner. We're covering media breakpoints. It's definitely super important to have a responsive first design. Your site may be seen on a tiny smartphone or multiple wide monitors. Daily, we use lots of different screen sizes from a smartphone to a tablet and desktop. And people that use your site are definitely not viewing the site on the same screen size that you've built it with. Each device comes with its own unique traits, and they may have different screen dimensions and capabilities. So as developers and designers, it's our responsibility to handle these possibilities. So how do we handle having many different screen sizes? We can use media queries. Media queries are CSS rules that allow us to apply different styles based on the characteristics of our audience's device. They take effect only when certain conditions are met, and examples of these certain conditions would be having a minimum width, a maximum width, and an orientation. What we can do with these media queries is adjust font size, we can change images, and create flexible designs that seamlessly transition from a large desktop screen to a smaller mobile device, all while maintaining the core functionality a user expects from a website. We can also use Tailwind CSS, and Tailwind here has a page on responsive design. Tailwind's utility first approach saves you from writing tons of custom CSS. Tailwind introduces modifiers which let you apply styles only when your user's screen meets the specific dimension. So here they have their breakdown of their breakpoints: small, medium, large, extra large, and 2XL. This is some information, and this is what their media queries look like in CSS. So with Tailwind and just a few classes, you can rearrange elements. And we will be diving into some examples of media queries with a special spotlight on Tailwind CSS.
Thanks, Christina. I'm going to be demonstrating some of the concepts that we just went over. I've created a page to showcase some of the examples. Am I showing the right page here? I think I am. So yeah, here's a page that I'm working on to showcase some of these examples. Here's a tip for testing media breakpoints in your browser. You can right-click on the page and go to inspect. What this does is open your developer console. And from here, you can click on the little device toolbar button on the top left. Once you click on that, it'll give you a list of devices. You can also come to edit and add some of your own custom devices as well. But what I like to do is use the responsive dimension, which lets you resize your screen as needed. You can see my text over here changes in both size and color as I resize the screen. Color is a bit less important, but changing the size of the text is important for supporting multiple devices and making your text more readable. Here's a few other examples you can do with media breakpoints. I have some text here that is only visible on larger screens. And as you see, if I make my screen a bit smaller, it does disappear. And this is useful for if you have a page that has a lot of elements or a lot of components, and you want some to be only visible on larger screens. Another example is displaying things in either rows or columns. This is good if you want to still display the same information, but make it a bit easier to view on a smaller device. You can see how these two items are beside each other. But as you make the screen smaller, it goes from being flexed on the row to being displayed in a column. And this is great too if you have a long screen and you just scroll through all the options. Putting all these concepts together, here's a bit of a higher level example using a table. Make that appear. Now here we have a table, just a list of users, a simple table, but keep an eye on the title column here. As we make the screen smaller, the title column goes from being a column to just information under the name column instead. And this is a great way to kind of stack information in a table rather than having a bunch of columns that are squished and hard to read. You can even see the add user button go from being on the right side just to under the text. You can see the email field also wrapped under and became part of the name column as well. And this is kind of a combination of all the techniques that I've showcased before and kind of a real world example of how you can use this in your own apps. That was a bit short, but that's kind of all we wanted to cover today.
I got a couple questions. Christina, that orientation.
Yes. So
I've never seen that. I don't like I've seen it before, but I've never actually bothered to use it. And that's something that actually, I guess it's really more of a Pearson thing. But I guess it's not just about the width in that case. I'm just wondering, what would an example be where I would want to use that as compared to just hiding something at a certain breakpoint? Like if I have a table and it's got, first name, last name, middle name, and then I go landscape, I usually just show some more fields because it's wider. But orientation is distinctly different because it's talking about a device. Like, where would we use that, I wonder?
For me, what jumps out is on a smartphone, you definitely don't want like a header. You'd want the hamburger menu. But if you're on the opposite direction, the longer way, you could probably add more in the header.
Right.
Definitely adding more fields on either
I guess
iPad or a phone.
So in a portrait, you might even get rid of like a whole sidebar, and it's not just based on width; it's based on how the user is physically holding the device.
I guess another thing is you can kind of know the height of the screen as well, depending on if they're horizontal or vertical, and the height might change some of the design concepts that you're working with, because maybe some things are easier to see on, I don't know, a square device, maybe like a tablet versus kind of a long or a rectangular screen.
Right. I'm looking at like the YouTube app, for example, and when you're on a phone, there's all kinds of metadata stuff that shows up below. But when you go horizontal, you just see the visual. So I think that might be an example as well, where that would sort of come into play. Oops. And let's go back to here. All right. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Does anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? All right, we'll jump to our feature. I'd like to welcome our guests, Paul Costanzo and Vanessa Costanzo. Absent is Chris. I understand he's traveling or something today. They're from NaviCu, and I first met this team. I'm trying to think. It must have been like 2016, maybe something like that.
And I was relying on you to remember the year. I'm old, so I don't remember. I know the circumstance, but I don't remember the actual year.
Right, we start to forget, though. I intentionally forget those. Yeah. That's like I have on my Twitter post. It's like I'm at the age where I don't tell people what first version of FileMaker I used. Normally, people are flexing with that all the time, right? So I was doing some subbing for a brilliant developer, Steve Winter, and Steve is kind of like the custom web publishing god, if you will. And he was traveling on a bike trip from, I think it was from Beijing to Turkey, if I remember correct. And that was going to take about 6 months. So he contacted me and he said, can you cover through Twitter? And I said, yeah, I do some PHP stuff. And then I didn't hear from him for about a month. And then about 3 weeks before he left, he ran through all of his code, right? And there's some really, really neat stuff. And actually, that was a big inspiration for me to learn or to build BetterForms, because some of his concepts towards dynamic form rendering. So anyhow, one of his clients was NaviCu, or at the time, well, get into that. And I had a chance to work with the team, and I really, really, every time we've had conversations and things like that, it's been I find them very, very motivational. And I wanted to invite you guys on as our first guests for this consultant spotlight, because I think you set sort of a high benchmark. So welcome, guys. And I'm not sure if we should share this while we're talking, or we should jump to the other view.
Vanessa, I think Vanessa has a deck that we can go through with questions on there. So she's, as usual, she's very organized, so she keeps us on track. So
I wouldn't know what that's like. All right, so I'm going to stop my share, and maybe you guys start off, and I'll let you take over, and we'll go from there.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you want us to jump into your questions, Charles, or do you want to?
You can go whatever we want. It's casual, so.
Okay. Cool. Paul, do you want me to share, or do you want to just?
Sure, you can share. Yeah, if you want to share the deck. I mean, thank you, Charles. I I appreciate it. We are very honored to be here. I mean, this is exciting. I mean, we feel very strongly about FM BetterForms and kind of what it's meant to our business. And hopefully the opportunity to share will provide a little bit of insight in terms of kind of who we are and what we do and the journey. I don't know, do you have on the screen, basically, as Charles already mentioned, we feel a little bit shorthanded today, because Chris really is, he is our master of all things, related to our development. And he is either, I think just recently boarded a plane, so he's hopefully at about 30,000 feet, I think, traveling. So that's why he is not here. Because of that, obviously, we will our focus will be maybe much less technical without Chris being here, but we'll rely on Charles and Andrew to, if we get stuck in the weeds on some of the tech things. In terms of the company, as Charles mentioned, we actually started in 1994 as Recruiting Pro Software. So that was actually our history as far as where we began. And at that point, what Recruiting Pro was really, it was a vertical market SaaS company that we basically provided a system for recruiting and data management for college athletic programs. That was really our initial focus in those early years. And so just kind of going through these questions, Vanessa, if you want to just go forward here on the, so this is kind of a little bit about our history. So we did that for several years. We were very fortunate in that, a lot of it really, you'll hear in the story, it's people and platform. I mean, that's really what the journey has been about. And you'll hear about that several times. But we were fortunate in the sense that we had a lot of high profile clients, Notre Dame football, Michigan football, Duke men's basketball, North Carolina men's basketball. And we had about 125 fairly high profile clients as we were doing this. And about 10 years ago, we started to see a shift. I mean, NCAA compliance actually started decreasing, which was a large part of what we provided. The recruiting process changed with a lot of the advent in social media and different things that were occurring. So what ended up happening is we saw a trend towards these highly customized systems that these big programs would pay a fairly significant amount of money for on an annual basis, to more commodity-based, generic systems that would have 1,000 customers. And that really wasn't our niche. We didn't really, that really wasn't what we wanted to do. We were very fortunate that we ended up having a former coach who had had us at several schools, got out of coaching and was leading an oil services company in Salt Lake. And one day he called me up and he said, I've got this new job. I really need Recruiting Pro for my sales and operations teams. Could you do that? And we're like, sure. So we basically built a system from the ground up that was based on some of the CRM elements that we had in Recruiting Pro. And that began our journey down the non-athletic custom development path, I guess is what is the best way I would explain it. And I guess I'll turn it over to Vanessa in terms of the evolution piece.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides of it. So there's the change in innovation and technology kind of at large, and especially within the Apple ecosystem that has allowed us to really evolve over the years and offer new features and tools and products. And then as we've put together our team, it's also allowed us to find kind of different niches. So whether it's Tableau or having someone that has like a lot more client experience and project management experience and being able to bring that to the table, or focusing on web and API integrations or MirrorSync and the iOS SDK. As we've kind of grown and put together our team, we've evolved and kind of found these different areas that we like to each individually focus on, which has allowed our company to really evolve and grow as well, and has allowed our client experience to grow and change and become a big focus in what we do. I think from that client services perspective, we, as Paul mentioned, we went from having 125 clients, so not the thousands of clients where it was much more commoditized and there was no contact, but we spoke to infrequently. I would say it was more general tech support. Like, I'm having trouble with this field, or can you help me print this, or I want to change this report, or those types of things. Can you help me turn on my computer was one of my favorites when I was doing tech support. To kind of now a more curated list of those custom development clients that we are speaking with and meeting with on a regular basis to ensure their systems are really in line with their business needs and what their goals are for the future for their business growth. So that's kind of the two sides of that, and I would say how those have evolved over the years.
A funny anecdote following up on what Vanessa said. I was reminded yesterday we were at a tech conference, and someone said, "How long have you been involved in the company?" And we laughed because she was probably 15 years old and was providing tech support. You know, people would call in with questions, and it was so funny because they'd have no clue. And then we'd get to the convention, you know, like the Final Four convention and things, and they'd be like, you're not even old enough to go to the coaches party tonight, you know. And it was kind of like, it's kind of funny how things, you think back in some of those memories. In terms of major turning points, it's kind of funny because as everyone knows, during COVID, things really slowed down. You know, I mean, it was kind of like, you know, that people were on hold, they were waiting to see what they were doing. And so we made the decision, interestingly enough, to embark on a rename and rebrand, and spent a fair amount of money with a firm to basically, you know, because for years we were doing this custom work, and people, you know, they'd say, "Oh, what's your company name?" "Oh, Recruiting Pro." "Oh, well, do you do HR systems?" And we'd be like, well, yes, but that's not really, you know. And so we'd have to explain the whole story. So we met with this firm, and it was a great exercise. I mean, they interviewed us, they interviewed some of our clients, and you know, the idea was, what really came out of this was the name and the brand of NaviCu, you know, kind of navigating custom solutions. But I think it really solidified the point that while we work on a variety of platforms with a variety of tools, really our clients don't care about that. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't, you know, we'd like to think, oh, we're, you know, we can code, or we're creative, or we're innovative. But really what they want to know is they're coming to us with a business problem or a business idea, and they want an innovative solution. They want us to you know, provide them with a path forward. And I think that was kind of the key pivot, is realizing that you know, that was kind of the future. And I think it goes back to the people side of it's all about relationships. I mean, we've been in business now, it'll be, you know, 30 years next year, and we've never had a salesperson. I mean, we've always built on referrals, word of mouth, you know, just people talking, you know, connections, and people coming to us with these different types of questions. So I think that was kind of some of the pivot moments for us, if you will. We go to the next slide about the products and offering, please. You know, one of the questions was this idea of, you know, kind of increasing products and service offerings. I think BetterForms, you know, I mean, in terms of how we discovered it, Charles gave you the story, which in and of itself is an amazing thing, because, you know, it's, for those of you, I think I may be the oldest person here, but, you know, I think back to when 25 years ago, we thought we were, you know, just amazing, because one of the things the NCAA used to allow you to do is you could send an athlete a questionnaire. And so schools spent crazy money developing these beautiful, like full color photos, these amazing things. And they'd send this form to this athlete and it'd be blank. So it's like, oh, you're the fifth best quarterback in the country, but we're sending you a form that doesn't even have your name on it. And that always seemed kind of strange. And so we turned around and we made the massive leap of doing them as a mail merge so that the athlete got the form. If we knew everything about him, the only thing he filled in was his top 5 schools or his favorite food or whatever goofy question. And we just thought that was the hottest thing, 30 years ago. That was cutting edge, And so then, as Charles mentioned, we crossed paths with Steve at a DevCon about 25 years ago. And the idea was, you know what? Let's do that on the web. Let's do an online questionnaire where the athlete can log in. They can have that experience. They can see all the cool content and then just update the data as need be. And that really began the journey. And this idea of we transitioned into the online questionnaire as well as a student athlete portal that would do, we had the entire athletic department at Columbia where all of their sports and all of their athletes would go in and fill out this stack of forms, online basically. And as Charles mentioned, I mean, Steve did the Silk Road on a bike, which still to this day is crazy, and was gone for 6 months. And Charles graciously stepped in and was our support during that absence. And that's really what began, the relationship and the friendship. Quite honestly, was that path and that journey.
It's funny.
So,
sorry if I can just interject.
go ahead.
There was a one of the we had talked quite a bit, I think, over Zoom or actually Skype or whatever it even was then. I'm not even sure. I don't think it was Zoom. I don't even know if Zoom was around. And
Skype.
Then the first time I met Chris, I was at the .fmp. No, sorry, not .fmp. What is it?
Was it Pause?
Pause. Thank you. Pause in Cleveland, I think.
Yeah.
And Chris is telling me all this information, and I had total imposter syndrome because he's blasting me with, okay, I'm going to go through this, and he's super prepared, and I was probably super unprepared, and he's blasting me with all this kind of information about, okay, there's this and that, and I got this code, and I got this ready for you, and it's like, okay. I'm just nodding and just and then I go home and study, that kind of thing. But that really actually sort of set the tone of that relationship, that come prepared, bring your A game. And what I really, really like is, Chris isn't here, and we'll have him on a separate show just talking about some tech stuff. But what I really like is just the attitude. Everything is always so positive. I've always told my team, it's like, as soon as I get off a call with Chris, I feel like I'm ready for the game. And we're just talking about coding, right? So it's been really, really great that way. So thank you too.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. I also feel that way about it. So kind of diving into how FM BetterForms has enabled us to expand what we offer in our product. I think ultimately we would all agree that it's allowed us to build sites with the skill sets that we have and that we have on our team, but gives us the power to leverage the experts from FM BetterForms like Andrew and Charles and Pearson, and still lean on Steve for projects where we need him to come in and help us. So we can take it to the next level, but we can still go in and change and make updates to it on our own to make it work and to be able to do some of those probably more simple things internally and be able to make those quick fixes or those quick changes, but also still have the power to be able to leverage our experts, as we call them. And I think that's been one of the coolest things about using BetterForms and working with the team is just that next step that we can take it to. Another thing is building the UX UI component into the process when working with Pearson. That has been an incredibly positive thing, not only from us on the coding side and the efficiencies we've gained there, but also for our clients to really have that visualization and be able to click through things and see how things are going to look and feel and work and test before going into development. And we've already gotten down maybe what was the wrong path. And so we can make those changes at the beginning. And those two things have been really huge for us in some of the, especially more recent projects that we've done. I think advice. So I phoned a friend for the advice that we would give other dev consultants before Chris left. I called him late last night, and he said the biggest things that he would recommend is for people to brush up their skills in standard HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and basic web development. Those were kind of his. These are the things that I would start working on if you're really interested in running with FM BetterForms. I would add that it is really beneficial to partner with the FM BetterForms team, not only for their skill sets and expertise, but you all know the platform the best and you help us leverage it and use it to the best of its abilities or the best of its capabilities. And that would be from the not under the hood coding side of things. That would be one of the takeaways that I've had from watching our process and working with you all. So with that, so I'll kind of jump into our process. About 7 years ago now, I came to Paul with this idea, and I'll actually jump ahead. That I didn't want to just do discovery and spec docs, but I wanted to develop this process and start charging for it. So that from the time we start discovery and scope, that is something that has value and that should be valued by the client. And so I wanted to start, instead of just having 1 or 2 meetings and meeting with someone and saying, okay, I think we understand this project. Here's 1 page, sign off, sign this huge contract and let's go. I wanted to break those out and to really develop a process around how we did that. I believe at the time his words were, that's never going to work and people aren't going to pay you for that. And he said, but if you come up with the idea and the process and you put together what you want it to be, we'll try. So that's really led to this NaviCu P2S platform. And we initiate it with after kind of an initial contact with someone, we have a letter of engagement, which kicks off our discovery process. We actually built a discovery portal in FM BetterForms to help us with that information gathering stage. So it allows our clients to involve more people because they can easily give access to a lot of their different staff, control who has add and edit access for different workflows and features and functionality, and is really the central location for information gathering. So getting input from the people that are really in the workflows and impacted by the changes in systems we're proposing to put in place. So that's been a really, oh, go ahead.
If I could just jump in real quick, because I want to just make a point here, because I think Vanessa's exactly right. I was totally wrong, about this whole process. And the amazing takeaway has been, this requires a lot of work for our clients. We tell them that up front. You're going to spend a lot of time to do this well and to document these workflows and to rate these tools that you're using. It's going to take effort. But the amazing thing is to see the light bulb moments that come out of that in terms of their discovery of, well, wait a second, finance thinks we do it this way and operations thinks we do it that way. What's the result? And the fact that they find that the game plan that we're producing is ultimately becoming an operations manual for their company. They could be in business for 40 years, and now for the first time, they're getting a lot of these processes documented. I'm sorry, because I think that has been a really important takeaway, is the work that they've put in has benefits even outside of the software project. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great point. And going to that, I think one of the interesting things is, like Paul said, a lot of times people will realize their current state is being done differently by different people in their organization. So breaking down those kind of information and data silos and getting these things that are this institutional knowledge that, well, this works because Susie knows how it is and she knows which clients go to which thing, and actually putting that on paper so that they can say, okay, how are we going to make sure that if something happens to Susie, our company can still function? So really looking at those ideal state workflows and not just current state. So what's your unicorn? What's your dream? What's your wish? Let's see how we can put things together to get as close to that as we can. So kind of from there, we move into scope, where we take all of our information. We're putting that into, as Paul said, our NaviCu game plan, a nod to our athletic roots. And a lot of times recently, that's included clickable wireframes, working with Pearson or other UX UI experts to give that visual aspect as well, to go in with the kind of technical nuts and bolts, and see relationship diagrams and layout maps and some things that might go right over some users' heads, but that they can see that visualization and understand what we're saying. I think kind of other things I'd like to point out throughout the process. So one of the things that originally we weren't going to put on here, but I think is really important, is the kickoff meeting. I think this kind of speaks to the next question, Charles, you had about effective client communication, in that it really sets the tone. It sets the tone of, here are our expectations we're going to have for you throughout the process. Here's what you can expect of us. Here's how we will communicate with you. And here's kind of our schedule for this first phase of development and what you can expect from us. It's that kind of kickoff, like, let's everyone be really excited. We're going to hit the ground running, gets everyone on the same page and sort of builds that excitement. We encourage clients to bring as many people from their staff as can be available to come to those kickoff meetings, just to really make sure that everyone's on board and feels like they're a part of it. I think I mentioned it earlier, but part of the discovery process that we found to be most helpful is the people that will bring in their employees that are going to be most impacted by whatever we're changing, so that we have them on board from the beginning. So this isn't this massive change that 6 months from now is just put in their lap and they're expected to embrace and adapt to. I think another thing that we've kind of iterated and evolved in is how we schedule development. So obviously the cycle of development, review, testing, changes isn't anything special. But we've really tried to condense our development into sprint cycles, if you will, not, I would say, in a traditional agile sprint methodology, but kind of our own spin on it. So it's giving us consistent cadence, consistent meetings, consistent testing, consistent feedback, so that the client can feel comfortable in that process and in that timeline. And it's allowing us to use testing not only to test, but expose end users to the process and workflow. One, before development is completed, but two, again, just to kind of ease those fears of change and new, and what if I'm not going to know how to use it? So getting them in there from the testing time point, and then also building in training for some clients into those sprint cycles before things are even being launched into a live production system. So I think the next question was on client communication. So one of the things we've used for our client communication is a custom ticket system that we have built right into all of our systems. So a client can go to their support button, they can click it, they can submit a bug fix, a feature request, or view all of their open tickets. We have a Kanban board, so they have a visual representation of what's coming up as far as what they can expect to see developed. And that's really helped us set realistic and consistent expectations. The ticket system is kind of built to our process. So whether they need to review and approve something, or if they're going through client testing, that can all be done right within the ticket. They can provide the feedback in the ticket, so we don't have an email thread with one-off replies and a bunch of different branches that nobody is on the same page. It's all in one place. They know where to go and we know where to go. I would say that and regular meetings throughout the sprints have been one of the best kind of client communication aspects of where we've gone in our project life cycle and our process. And Paul, I think you wanted to tackle unique challenges we faced in consulting and how FF BetterForms has helped us overcome those.
Yes, this question was I think it's very, very important because obviously there's always challenges that come up. And I think the key thing, again, going back to those two terms, it's people, it's platform. And I think that's, our whole, really our method is always finding the right tool for the job, not sitting there and saying, well, okay, we're going to fit this square peg in this round hole. And I think that's where it really, as it relates to development options and really deployment options, that's where BetterForms has really allowed us to extend, kind of our traditional, what we've done in a FileMaker client server environment or iOS SDK, to extend those types of things to the web has been increasingly important, because I'm not sure there is a major project we've done in the recent history that hasn't had some web component to it. So I think that's just kind of, and I don't know that that's going to change moving forward. And I think the key thing is talking even a little bit about licensing and licensing relief, if you will. Our largest clients they have FileMaker site licenses. So it's not a matter that they're trying to avoid paying FileMaker. But in one case, in one of our big clients, their whole thing is they want the deployment ease of use of having a whole segment of their user base not have to install another application. So that's kind of an important thing to where you can have that broad-based component that Vanessa's going to demo here in a second, where they're not having to worry about those installation issues. And then the obvious piece is the public access. We do a lot of tools that are publicly available, where obviously the web is the way to go. And so, we just feel that it's a great marriage to be again, finding those right tools within the platform that then allow us to extend, kind of what we've already started to build as the hub, to extend it out into different spokes. I mean, that's an analogy we use all the time of, central data hub, spokes of integration. Any questions about, we're now kind of getting into the good things about the success and the demos. Anything, other questions that people have, or just things?
I actually have a couple.
Okay.
I just been making notes because I'm gonna from a selfish aspect, this is all really good stuff for us as well internally, and it's like, okay, this is really, really good. I'm literally texting Madalena and saying, yeah, this is what we're doing wrong, right? And I'm saying all of these things. So just going back to Vanessa with your kickoff meetings, who's usually in those? And this is a kickoff not internally but with the client.
Correct. So typically we bring our whole team, as well as we encourage the client to anyone that will be an end user or involved in the development, testing, training process. We ask that they invite everyone. And for most of our systems, it's touching their entire company or all of their divisions. So at the very least, we'd ask for kind of like managers, directors, that level. But we strongly encourage to have everyone there.
And what do you do in terms of a format? And is it like just one meeting, or do you have these on
It's
regular?
just one meeting.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty short, like 30 minutes or less. And it really is just that touching base of, we heard, because a lot of times they'll have everyone involved in discovery to get their input and to tell them what they're doing in their job, essentially, so that we can capture that and incorporate that into the project. And then some of the people that are impacted the most by the project are likely not going to be involved once we present the game plan and management is deciding, okay, are we moving forward with this project, or are we not? They're not really involved in that side of things. And so that's our opportunity to say, hey, we heard what you had to say in discovery. Here is kind of our 30,000 foot plan of where we're going with this. And we're really excited to have you on board and to get your feedback. We talk about how testing will work and that they'll be getting a launcher to access the testing server. They will be able to submit tickets and feedback in our ticketing system. We'll talk about the cadence of meetings and what that sprint cycle looks like, and how, if they're worried about not being ready or not being trained, how we'll build in testing and training right into that sprint cycle. Really trying to kind of proactively prepare for change and get everyone excited and on board, and just kind of that transparency of, here's what's coming. Here's, maybe your management team's been heads down working on this and you've been wondering what's going on and there's some uncertainty. Here's where we're at, and here's where things are going.
So for your testing, how do you get them to test something, like in the sense of they'll kind of log in once, and because it's not a live system, they log in and they just blow it off, and it's like, yeah, didn't work for me, and that's it.
So, and I think this is one of the things Paul's going to touch on one of his demos he's going to show, but we've really embraced kind of the 3 environment ecosystem. So we have our dev environment, we have our testing environment, and we have our production environment. And we're using Auto, I believe, to help us kind of manage that transition from each environment as we go through the process. But it's allowed us, I think one of our clients recently said, like, I want you to move fast, but I want it to feel slow. And by kind of throttling at what point they're getting things, we're able to keep up our development pace. But to them, they're seeing things in testing, they're having a week to process it. Then we're doing training in the testing system. They're having a week to go in and try it and not be worried about messing up their real data, and not being worried about messing up their actual live system, where they can go in. So essentially they have 2 weeks where they can go in and try these new things, and then it goes to production. But they can still go back to testing, and they can still go in and say, okay, like, I think this is how Vanessa taught us how to do this. Like, I want to go in and try it for myself. At any point, they can go into testing and do that. And that's been really valuable. I would say getting them to test the right things, that's been a learning process on our end. Within each ticket, we can put multiple kind of testing tasks, and actually learning to break those down, probably more granular than I think Chris and I originally thought and intended, has been key. So, and using screenshots. So we'll send a screenshot and we'll say, make sure everything on this layout, if everything that you click, make sure it does what you want it to do. They have to go in and click every button that's on there and make sure that every button takes them to or provides the action that they're looking for. And then they can either pass or fail that specific line item in that ticket. And then that is our prompt that we didn't do something right, and they have to put in comments of what it is they want fixed.
How do you guys mitigate scope creep? I'll bring out the big guns, right? Big questions.
Sometimes better than others.
I think I'll tackle that. I think the key thing, it goes back to really the start, in that when we're doing the game plan, we do a PERT analysis. One of the things Vanessa had brought in, from her training and her education thing, was this idea of it's basically just an estimating tool. So it's just a tool where, I think it has military background, but it's basically, you put in, best case scenario, worst case scenario, most likely scenario, and you put time in for all of these tasks, and it generates a value. And we share with them, that's how we're doing things. And I think so we've established a clear budget, for each of these phases. It's not that we're just picking a number out of the air and saying, oh, okay, it's going to be X. And so I think part of the key is that when they come to us, so let's say it's a feature request, they put a feature request ticket in the system. So they're in the system, they put in a feature request. By doing so, they're telling you, in effect, this is above and beyond. I mean, this is something that wasn't built in. We're asking for something new. So that's where you're starting that discussion right away of saying, like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. And right in those tickets, they can request an estimate as to what the PERT will be for that. And they can say, oh yeah, it's a great idea, but I'm not willing to spend 20 hours of dev on it. It's not that good of an idea. And so I think that's kind of the the way we try to proactively match that and let them kind of feel like they have the control. I mean, and if they really do think it's a great idea and they want to spend 20 hours, let's go. I mean, I don't know. Sorry. I mean, Vanessa, would you agree that's kind of the key?
Yeah, I think another thing that's been, well, one, in the ticketing system, they have to rank it. So is it like, I think there's different, in bug fixes, like it's like critical, like the system is breaking, like help, SOS, like this isn't working, this needs to be done immediately. Obviously, those are things that are going to be done right away. But as you go down in severity, it goes down into kind of, okay, is this something like that it's a white page instead of a blue page and it doesn't really matter? Like, is that something that at the end of the day is a big deal? But I think the other important thing about using the ticketing system is they're involved in setting the tone and the priority for what development is coming up next in the sprint. So they can go in and see all of their high or critical, or sorry, high or immediate tickets and say, okay, out of these 6, there's 5 of them that are in the next sprint. We want to swap out one of those for something else. And so it's kind of giving them the power to say, okay, if you want to change the scope, that's fine, but it comes at a cost. There is a trade-off. You can't have this and the new thing. You can have this amount of time in this sprint. What's most important to you in order to accomplish the goals that we have for this project?
You had mentioned
some people that's easier with than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is being recorded. No names.
Well, I mean, it's a challenge, and I don't think it's any fault of the clients. They're seeing this amazing power that they're going to a dev company like yourselves, and they're saying, and you're starting to produce something, and as soon as you start to produce anything, the wheels just start spinning, and then they realize what the potential and the future can bring, and their initial idea, their creativity was governed by what they know, and you've just expanded that horizon. And so I think that's where a lot of feature and scope creep comes from. But also, I think it's from lack of discovery. And you had stressed a lot that you guys work quite a bit on the discovery process. And you mentioned that you worked with a number of designers, I believe, Fred, Illies, Anna Murphy, and Pearson as well. And where does that come in onto this discovery process? Is that after you sort of get the needs? Is it part of it? Like, how does that sort of fit together?
So our process so far, and I mean, I'd love to get Pearson's take on this, but to see what he thought. But our process so far is we've kind of done the information gathering, and I think internally we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to need when we get to that UX UI point. There have been times where he's pushed back and said, well, no, like you don't need to put that here, like that comes later in the process, from a design perspective and not overwhelming people. And so I think by the time we get to that UX UI design, we have a pretty good idea of what the client's pain points are and what the ultimate goal is for the project, so that we can be that conduit for the designer, and be that point person for them, so that they don't also have to be going through all of the questions of, oh, well, do we want the client to log in? Don't we want the client to log in? Those sorts of things. But I think we've gone through 2 different iterations with Pearson, so I'd be curious to hear from your perspective how that's worked.
Yeah, sorry, do you mind rephrasing that? My opinion on what exactly?
Yeah, just kind of where we have embedded the UX UI portion of discovery and scope into our process. So where we're doing like a lot of the information gathering and kind of goals and objectives, and then coming to you, and that you're really working, I think, just with us in the projects that we've done, and not with kind of the end user or client.
Yeah, no, I think I personally find that we've got a good system going because I think you guys have a very good understanding of what, like you said, what the users need and what their pain points are, and so I think that helps alleviate some of the pressure for me to uh, to intimately learn this I guess like this environment that we're working in, because I'm working. I got my hands in a lot of different pies right now. So if you guys can handle that portion of it and relay to me what's important, what do they need, and what are they looking for, I think that expedites the process a lot. I think it's been going really well.
Yes, I agree. One point I want to make too, if I could, just real quick, kind of going back to the whole scope creep. When we first started going down this custom dev path, my thought was going to be someone would come to us with a project, we would do it, they would pay us, and we'd go our separate ways. And then another person would come to us with a project, we would do it, they would pay us, we'd go our separate ways. The reality of it is, what's happening is we're doing the project, they're paying us. 6 months later, they're coming back saying, we got a great idea. Now that you built this for us, can you add this onto it? Or can you do this for us? And so I think that's kind of the thing of, we want to encourage the scope creep part in the sense that, hey, that's a great idea. Let's look at that for next phase. That goes in the spring phase, or that goes in the fall phase. I mean, I think that's kind of the idea of trying to keep your pipeline full, in the sense that it's kind of, short. And we tell them I think that, just to give you some idea, biggest game plan, Vanessa, 350 pages, right? Am I right on that? What's the count?
379.
She knows the number. It was a massive undertaking. And we explained to them that that's a point in time document, and that it's designed that it's going to organically change. In 3 months, there's going to be changes. In 6 months. And so I think that mindset has to be in from the very beginning, that you want this to be an evolving piece. Because there's not a single project that what we started at the beginning, at some point we didn't come and say, oh no, that's not really right, we want to go a different direction, and so I think that flexibility and the ability to pivot is really important. Sorry, that was just an important thing that I don't think we talked about, and I think it's really important if you're going to do custom development.
And I think, Charles, you touched on this in one of your comments of how things are changing, and that's been the key for some of our clients, has been that their businesses have had to change drastically over the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. And they need to have that flexibility, and knowing that they can come to us and say, we thought this was going to be our process, but now we can't be in person with people, so we need to change our process. So we do need to change the scope, and can you be flexible with that? And not being as rigid in well, this is what we scope this project as, we can't change it. Of, okay, let's see what we can swap out, let's see what we can change, let's see how we can adapt and grow with you and your company. And I think that's been key.
It's interesting how you turn the scope creep is actually a good thing. We just look at it the wrong way all the time, and I think that's a real killer takeaway.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's where our future status is in our ticket system.
So I onboard a lot of people. We do a lot of hands-on 100% on hands-on onboarding with our clients. And we sort of have the philosophy to teach a person to fish and versus just giving them the fish. But we often find, even just on simple projects, and this is usually we're always dealing with directly with developers. And sometimes it's a developer of a dev house, or quite often an in-house developer. And even the developer, don't self-manage their scope of their project. And quite often I'll find, well, I want to build this, and I want to build that, and I want to build this. And I have to really, really constantly claw them back. And it's like, let's get one thing out the door, whether it's a simple smart link or something simple that you get some ROI right away, and get something built. And instead of just going and adding all the pretty bits and not actually having anything wired up. And so I think that it's not only it's a sort of a problem with maybe clients, but it's actually right embedded in the developers even, because from my experience anyway, we already have a lot of feature creep, and we haven't even built anything yet. We haven't get we like the idea of maybe the challenge or the discovery process or something along those lines. What kinds of, if you don't mind me asking, what kinds of apps have you built?
Yeah, so I
show you.
I'll kick us off here.
I think I've seen most of them, but you know,
I don't think.
I think you've seen all of these, but so this I believe started as our very first major FM BetterForms project. It is an online CRM. So as Paul mentioned, this client has a site license for FileMaker, but their salespeople had a very distinct opinion that they did not want to install an app and have to use an app. They wanted something that was on the web. And so that's kind of where this CRM started, was building this web-based CRM for their sales team to communicate to the office staff and to kind of track all of their progress and their sales and their commissions and contracts and pricing requests and everything. So this latest iteration or project in this CRM is an integration with Microsoft, and specifically for the to-do and task integration with Microsoft Office and this FM BetterForms CRM. So originally, when they came to us with this project, we had a lot of questions, and I think Chris's first question was, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we recreating something that Microsoft has does? And they right away were saying that this is a recruitment tool. It lowers anxiety for our salespeople when they're coming in, that they know they can just go to one place. It's in kind of a format that they're familiar with, and that they, some of them, a few of them prefer to use. But for the most part, people like being able to come and have this special tool. And it puts everything in one place. They have been growing exponentially in the last couple of years and acquiring new companies. So it makes it really easy for them to integrate with companies that are already using Microsoft, bring everything into this one singular platform that everyone can use. So that was kind of where this project started. And so we've worked with Steve on this, and we're actually still in progress on a few things. So I will not be showing you all of the checklist features, because I think Chris and Steve were up late last night working on that, and it's not quite done. But we are leveraging FM BetterForms webhooks and FM BetterForms messages to get this to refresh. So essentially, on the left here, I have our FM BetterForms CRM. On the right, I have our Microsoft To-Do tab. And so if I come in here to my FM BetterForms Friday Live task, I can come in and add, if I could type, add my checklist items. And then if I go back into Microsoft, we'll come in and hopefully see our checklist here. We'll give that a minute. So if we come in and we add a new task for to do, and we're adding it here on the CRM, we're seeing right away that's popping up in Microsoft Office. So we can also come in and say, add a note. As soon as that commits, we can see now that there's also that note here in Microsoft on the right hand side. So demo notes, here is what you need to do. And let's see if we can add our step one. If we add our checklist here, they were working on that last night and we may not have gotten all the way done. But those checklist items will show up here on the right as well. And I believe, oh, here, just took a minute. I'm just not very patient. So those are coming over using that webhooks and messages. If we come in and we complete a task, so if we complete here, we'll see our CRM task drops off from Microsoft immediately. So that is kind of what I wanted to show in that system, utilizing, I believe, 2 new BetterForms features.
Yeah, I remember I think a couple of days ago, Steve gave me a quick ping asking me a question about messages. And then about an hour and a half later, he goes, oh, it's got it working. It's exactly as expected. It's fast. Right. So, wow, that's pretty good. I'm still typing the responses to him. That's really neat. So you're pushing the message from BetterForms into FileMaker, and then there's an integration between FileMaker and the Office, and it's basically two-way. So now you effectively have live stateful BetterForms app, which is pretty neat. I'm not sure if Eduardo's on the call, but it's nice. Eduardo and I architected out the messaging system. He did all the code. I just said we need a messaging system. That was my part mostly. And it's nice to see, like, those features. When you build a feature, it takes a little while. It's actually been out for about a year, but we're just starting to see people use it as a feature, and realize how it's fairly flexible and easy. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it is cool to see people using, the features you implemented. So yeah, not just our internal
Chris was very excited about this one. So thank you, Eduardo.
Yeah.
And I will hand it over to Paul for a couple more demos.
So the next thing we want to show you is a client, GreenRock. And GreenRock is a company, they do energy management for large hotel chains, large housing apartment complexes. And this was an interesting journey, because I was the one that kind of ran the lead on the back end of this. And I have to give kudos to Andrew and Pearson for kind of the whole teaching an old dog new tricks. I mean, that's literally what this came around to, because this was kind of my first dipping my toe in, and Andrew was very gracious and very helpful. And the cool thing is it came out. I mean, as you can see, it looks really nice. I mean, the idea here is what's really cool about this is they have their client base that has all sorts of different users. And so they would have their series of properties that they could click on. And I think one of the biggest things, not only is it visually appealing, but I think, as you can see, as you click through this, the performance on these systems is outstanding. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that they were the most intrigued with and excited about, was the fact that, I mean, like in some of the cases for these utility graphs, there's literally thousands of records on the back end that, based on what BetterForms provides in terms of the data model and some of the caching that's going on, as you can see, I can scroll through these and have great performance. And again, I'm not sure I could even begin to explain to you how that's happening. All I know is the end result is very, very positive. These meter readings, for example, like if I drill down on these, I mean, this could be 7, 8, 9 years of readings that you'll see, for the most part, performs really, really well in terms of calling up this data, the formatting, some of the things that we built in, the add new, the ability to embed how to read the meter right in the process. So again, leveraging images that are in S3 that then they can pull down and say, oh, okay, here's for this specific reading, here's meter, here's how you go ahead and do the reading. So just really powerful. I think the next phase is to start building in some different types of data analytics, where there's things that are calculated on the fly, but I think there's some things we want to be able to do to give them even more ability to sit and say, did you enter in the incorrect time, or whatever the case may be. But the goal here, so it's kind of that mismatch of a mix of them presenting information to the client, but then also giving the client an ability to sit and say, like under projects, to come in and say, oh, okay, what are the comments? What was said about this? Is there something that they can, tell what, who the energy manager can make a comment, and then they can also respond to it. So it's been really well received. The other key part of the project was the fact that there's a separation of labor, if you will, in the sense that there are users and they're admins from a client perspective, which is really important because they're self-managing usage of the system. So if I am for one of the organizations, if I'm an admin, I can go in here and do user management and say, so for example, for Andrew, here are the properties Andrew can see. Here's the role he plays for those properties. And so that's determining his experience as he goes in and utilizes the system. So it's been a lot of fun. And again, Andrew, I owe him a great deal of his patience was incredible because he kind of was the one shepherding me through this whole process. But I don't know, any questions or things, or I don't know, Andrew, are there things specific that we should show that you folks would like to point out? I mean, you probably have a better handle on it than I do.
Nothing in particular. I know you talked about the performance, and this was kind of a technique that Charles brought up to me, was the idea of if it's data that you're accessing over and over again, why not keep it in an area that we can reaccess it, which is the app model. And Charles, I don't know if you want to talk about how we do that.
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of neat. I won't get into too much of the technicals, but I give you an idea, the high level idea. And this is kind of a unique case because, as Paul mentioned, there's literally like 2,000 and 3,000 meter readings. I guess what's once a month for years and years, like that you need to pull in and eventually aggregate all of this data. And although BetterForms has a relatively light load in terms of FileMaker and the data that you're only sending just more or less a JSON object representing one meter reading. Still, to go back into some piece of data, what the app effectively does is it starts to build out like a tree of the data. And if you think about, I have a top level of my tree, I have all my properties, and then I have projects, and then I have meters, and there's a structure to the tree. So every time you fetch something, you effectively cache it locally. And when you had come to us as specifying this, and when I got just kind of a wind of the project, I said, let's build this mechanism because I think this will work well here. And I know at first it was different. It's very different architecture from what you're done before internally, but now you can see sort of the benefits. So thanks for having the confidence and not pushing back. But this looks really, really nice. Like it looks. I'm watching you, and I'm getting giddy. Every time I see stuff, and I think that's really the same for, I would say, I don't want to say the whole team, because the whole team sometimes works on this kind of stuff, but I never get a chance to, and I don't think Eduardo often doesn't get a chance to work on these things. We're mostly working on the stuff that's kind of deep down, that's driving everything, and so it's neat to see, like, wow, that's running on our platform. So
that's very cool. And the thing I didn't mention too, like, these meter readings are daily. Part of the thing that the client has to do is they input these each day. So what John Smith is doing is he's going in and he's putting in, on 8/24, here was the meter reading. It's doing all of those proprietary calcs and then giving him that, kind of those deltas as to where they stand. So it's a real cool system, cool industry. But it's been really good. The other thing we'd like to show you is kind of our most recent, this would be, I think, our most recent BetterForms, FM BetterForms endeavor. And that is for, this is a company that they do early childhood education and curriculum across the country, actually across several countries. And what they wanted is they needed an online presence to be able to sell and to market their products and their trainings. And really this system, the FM BetterForm system, replaced what they had been doing in an old Shopify situation that was just very cumbersome. I mean, there were a lot of transitions involved and moving data in and out and trying to do transactions, to where now they can go in, someone could come in, they could filter out the courses, go to a particular course. Again, the UI on this is really nice. I can enter things in my cart. I can go into, all sorts of different types of certifications. We'll do one of the transition sets. We'll add that to the cart again. So it's a nice look and feel. The key thing we want to show here is this is the typical shopping cart. I can then continue to payment. The big thing with this project is that everything I'm showing you right now, as Vanessa mentioned, this is actually in our testing environment. So this is a sandbox for them. So using the FM BetterForms ability to have that staging piece, that's what this is triggering and what this is hitting. And then what we've done is we've married that up on the back end to, if I go over and show you, this would be the database. So again, this is their system running on the testing server that then gives them that sandbox, as Vanessa said, that they can test, they can run transactions, I can process this. And it just has some really nice things. I mean, there's some really nice ability to upload a purchase order, ability to process in real time with Stripe. It's just gone really well. And they just launched a month ago, right, Vanessa? Is this mid?
Just over a month ago, mid-July.
And they see this,
and it's really gaining momentum.
Yeah, I mean, they see it as a game changer for them, because then the person logs in, they can come in and they can sit and keep a history, of what they're selling and all those different types of things, as far as just the orders that have been placed and everything else. So those are those are examples of, I guess, two core, two core systems. And again, I think that's what where FM BetterForms has been real helpful, is it aligns really well with even our deployment mechanisms about dev, testing, production, falling into those different platforms. It seems really efficient.
And I think one of the things even too that's really important kind of in the training and testing portion of being on that testing server is you can go as far as to, on the testing environment, you can use the Stripe testing code. So like the codes you put in to test the transaction. So you can truly go through the whole process when you're on the testing server. If you try to input those when you're in production, you'll get that error code saying that's not a valid credit card number or expiration date or whatever the case might be. But it's truly giving them that full experience in that safe environment to do it.
And we keep referring to it as testing. They probably view it as much as a training environment, because that's where it's really, Vanessa's started doing a series of lunch and learns with a lot of our clients, specific clients. And part of the lunch and learn idea is using their testing training environment so they can see their data. I mean, that's a key thing, is that they're seeing, real life data in there. Any questions about or anything else? I guess I should have asked if there's anything else you wanted to show in that. But I think, again, I think it's been really positive.
I think Alessandro asked, do all the apps have a FileMaker server backend?
At this point, yes. I mean, I think for the most part, I'm trying to think of any instances where we're doing anything that's not. I mean, we're accessing other data sources, but I don't think any of them are driving any of the FM BetterForms.
Right, and just a quick add-in for Alessandro is you can use other databases as a backend. We don't primarily, I wouldn't say we don't support them by any means, but their BetterForms is tuned to the FileMaker aspect, not so much under the hood, but just the interface, the part that connects to basically your hook side. Aside from that, if anything that emulates FileMaker, and I think Jason Wood, who was on there, may be on the call, he actually built an example with, I think, a MongoDB where he connected Node-RED and used that. We have a number of apps, maybe 3 or 4 now, something like that, that run with Google Firestore, which is Firestore, Firebase, and it's their database. And there's some distinct advantages to using other technologies, but there's some really distinct disadvantages. And like the coding in to build a Firestore app, and Andrew's got an admin panel that he's built, and it's pure. There's no FileMaker in it. And it's a lot of work every time you want to add a little piece of code in, because you have to have this whole separate function and things like that. Whereas one of the great things about FileMaker driven web apps is the back end, you're doing at least 50-60% of the code. And if you include the admin part, it's maybe 70% of your application. And that happens in an environment where it's really, really easy to code. Whereas if we had the same app built, like if we had our backend FileMaker apps built in, say, Firestore with Cloud Functions, I can honestly say that would probably take, I don't know, what would you guys say? Maybe 5 times more effort, maybe something like that? Or it'd be significant anyway. To do that. So the option is there, and we're definitely interested in if you have other environments that you want some connectors for. Our connection is relatively generic, so it can pretty much plug into anything. And it was built originally, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I guess, altogether, for being flexible, not for being FileMaker specific, but our FileMakers are sort of our primary community that way. That was awesome, guys. Does anybody have any other questions? Sorry.
Can I say something?
Please.
No, my question, I know exactly what you say, but sometimes because they have some contact with big company, and when in a big company that you work in a standard way, sometimes when you say FileMaker, they don't really know what it is. And maybe in some case, you have a resistance from the client because you say, okay, you are great, you have a good idea, but we don't know what FileMaker is, so you're not a standard MySQL, and they start to using some different platform. And sometimes in the people in front of you is not open, you lost the opportunity to close the deal, okay? Because they are not interested to do something in the right way. They are interested to do something that everybody use the same platform that everybody say, and to not lose something like this. So, because this is my experience. Sometimes I have experience that when you say FileMaker, the people say, what is that? It's a joke. It is not this, but you don't have opportunity sometimes to explain that what is 10 exactly FileMaker is. Like, we know that, but big company, the people that make purchase or the people that make the needs, they don't know that. And so this is the reason my question, because how they handle, and my experience right now, I only say on the end that they use FileMaker. I don't say they're using FileMaker. I only provide that I give you the solution, and what we use on our backend, they don't are interested. So this is the point of my question, not technically. Right. Technically, I 200% agree with you, You don't need to explain me that.
I think if I could jump in real quick, one of the questions Charles had for us was, what are the core services we offer and what sets us apart from others? And I think it goes exactly to that point you're talking about. We really don't focus on code. I mean, the whole game plan is predicated about detailing the solution and selling, in essence, selling them on what the solution will be. I'm guessing that we have clients, they have no clue that FileMaker is on the back end, quite honestly. I mean, maybe some of the people that are clicking a launcher, like on the desktop, if they see the splash page come up. But I think that's the whole idea. It's not about the code. It's not even about the platform. It's about, developing a solution, that problem to solution, P2S platform. We just keep hitting on that over and over, that's the focus.
And I would add to that, developing the relationship throughout that business development process so that they trust our expertise. Right. Once we get into discovering scope, that they trust that what we're proposing is what is right for them, because we have also evaluated their technology stack and what they have going on in their company.
It's interesting. We all use Slack, but does anybody know that it's an Electron app? Does anybody know what an Electron app is, right? We don't care about the underlying technology, in reality. We know it's an app that I install on my desktop, or it's an app I use in my browser. And I think that's the ultimate, the right thing. You shouldn't be trying to sell what the stuff is made of. Like when I get a house built, I don't ask the guy, what type of wood are you using? I just assume that it's going to be proper 2x4s and such.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
That's a great one. I like that one.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that.
Especially in this era of integration. I mean, often what we're talking about now is, we're working on a new project right now coming up, and it's all about diving into their APIs. So what APIs what are we integrating with? What are the APIs available? Because that's really the world. I mean, to me, that's the future, is what can you connect to? It's not, okay, we're building our little silo. It's what can we connect to be able to harness the data that they already have. And that's even with Tableau. All of those other tools that we're using, to try to extend to meet the need of the client, basically. Sorry.
That's awesome. Awesome. Tons of good information. Madalena keeps texting me. She says, you better make the whole team watch this. So literally what she just sent me on the text. But because there's just some really, really good information. I know I never used to pay attention to all of this kind of stuff because I didn't care. I only cared about the tech. And going back for anybody who's, doing development, especially if you're starting off doing a consulting on your own, start implementing these practices that the successful firms have done, because they've already been made all the mistakes, and we're still in the process. Even though we're medium sized, we're still in the process of making tons of mistakes daily. And had we paid attention to some of this stuff years ago, I think it would make a massive difference. I did have one question for Vanessa earlier on. How often are those? You said you do your own sort of sprint cycles, and they're not sort of traditional agile. About how long is around the circle?
It depends on the client, either 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So we have one client in particular that wants that week of training before anything goes to production. So those are typically 3. Otherwise, we try and keep it at 2 weeks.
Interesting. The training is something that even in all the apps that we've built, we've never really added time in for that. And we do have one client where we've built a cash register style CRM. They sell these various security related services. And the biggest problem we found is we started looking at their files, and that they're not using the system. It's like, how come you're still using this old system that I built literally 12 years ago? And it turns out, there's one little glitch or a little thing here, or some training and stuff like that. So we had to go all the way back into this, and now we're in the process of fixing it all up and trying to get it out the door again.
Yeah, that's why when I saw heuristics 9 and 10 on Pearson's list, I was like, I'm very intrigued by those, like help documentation and how do you like help users get out of errors. Like I would love to chat more about that, Pearson. So I've already bookmarked the link you put in the chat.
Yeah, I'm glad I could introduce that to you guys.
All right, we're gonna jump forward a bit. Unless anybody has any questions, by all means, we're gonna kick around after. But we're coming up to the end of our sort of semi-allocated time. If I can get this thing, there we go. So we're gonna have a draw here. We have some new swag items. I don't know if you can see that. I don't see my preview, but anyway, some new water bottles, and we also have some t-shirts and things like that too to give away. But I don't have all of the sizes in stock right now, but we do have some new stuff coming in. So we'll take care of that. Yeah, let me just pause my screen here for a second while I find it.
Did you do the names ready, Charles?
Pardon me?
Did you already do the names?
I posted them in the Notion doc. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can find it here quick. This is one thing we don't have there's no automation on this one.
I've also bookmarked your Stream Deck. I'm very intrigued by that.
You know what? It was like $120 or something like that. I think what it was. I'm not sure, but it's one of these gizmos that I wasn't sure if I was going to use, but I actually use it quite a bit. Just the fact that I can push one button and whatever it is opens. It's very tactile. Did you find that, Andrew?
Yeah, I got you the link. Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks. So fast. I figured if I all right. So this is basically, if you're here, you win. If you're not here, we spin again. That's the sort of the rule. And let me just there we go. I think it's just click to spin. So let's see. clapping claps there. Is Nick in the call?
I do see Nick in the call.
All right. Well, if he's still got it open, then we'll assume that somebody came up. Nick is actually he's pretty creative developer. Nick, are you there? He's built in the process of building a software as a service, but it's got some, if you look at the Slack channel when he posts some stuff, it's got some really neat abilities that he's built into his app. Maybe we'll have him on some point in time too. All right. So Nick, Madalena is going to reach out to you and grab all your details on that. So congratulations. And I think we will stop things there. We're going to kick around a little bit. Next month, I think we're going to do some, I want to do some OpenAI stuff. I don't see many people in our community taking advantage of the stuff that we can do. So there's some pretty cool things that I want to, OpenAI has just released some things about functions that came out a few months ago. And just this week, they've announced that you can do micro tunings or fine tunings on GPT-3 Turbo, which means that you can get a cheaper, higher performance or higher speed AI, and it's tuned and it'll perform under most cases. You can adjust the tuning and it'll perform as well as GPT-4. So that's really kind of a big thing. And I want to sort of maybe talk about that. So we'll see if we do that. We also have some new features that should be released for next month as well that I'll tell you about. I'm going to hold off on it for now, but it basically significantly improves our app performance. So we're excited about that. And thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next month.